Magandang gabi po sa lahat ng kasama natin ngayong gabi dito sa Chikahan with Prof. Shelo Magno. Ang topic po natin ngayong gabi ay tungkol sa Facebook. Kung ito ba ay safe space para sa ating freedom of expression. Kasi po alam naman natin ngayon, majority ng mga Filipino ay nasa social media na at talagang nag-i-evolve ang function ng social media sa hindi lamang sa Pilipinas kundi sa buong mundo. No? But ang tanong ay, safe space nga ba to sa pagpapahayag ng ating mga opinion? So ang guest po natin ngayong gabi ay papakilala ni Professor Gatmaitan.
Magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Finally, nangyari na itong ating episode na ito, no? Dahil twice na siyang nagkaroon ng technical problems. Ang ating pong guest tonight, si Jenny Domino. Medyo technical yung kanyang bio, no? So, papa-explain natin sa kanya ano ibig sabihin nito. Non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab. At siya po ay Senior Case and Policy Officer at the Oversight Board of Meta. Yan yung Facebook, no? Yung
Company, yeah.
Yan. Where she also oversees content policy development on Facebook and Instagram concerning elections, protests, and democratic processes sa buong mundo. So hindi lang siya, I think yung most important qualification niya ay dati ko siyang estudyante.
Kaya hindi siya makatanggi, gano'n.
Ibig sabihin, meron akong mga estudyante yung pumapasa.
But she's now based in the US and connected po siya sa Facebook. So yung mga, siya ba yung responsible kapag may mga complaint?
Ay kasi kung meron pa kayong mga complaint, now's the time.
Alright, so let's call Jenny to join us. Ayan. Hi, Jenny.
Hello po, and good evening sa lahat ng nanonood. I should say that I'm a fan of Professor Shelo because I
Ako
listen
lang,
to
no?
Christian's podcast. And of course, my professor in 2 subjects,
Two, di ba? Method tsaka LocGov, I think.
LocGov, and I almost failed LocGov. So there, out in the world.
And yet, pumasa ka. That's the important part, di ba?
Hindi daw yung surprising. Ang surprising, pumapasa. Diba? Huwag bumabagsak parang, that's the norm. Anyway, so siguro we can start dahil may report na lumabas from the Amnesty International about, and specifically sa case ng Philippines, and medyo matagal na tong conversation, yung mga red tagging issue sa Pilipinas. Siguro, dinidiscuss naman na namin to, but just to quickly review yung konsepto po ng red tagging, no? So yung ipag po sinabi na halimbawa pinklawan or dilawan, hindi po yan red tagging. or DDS or BBL, hindi po yan red tagging. Specifically, ang red tagging po ay isang politically loaded term. Dahil pag sinabi pong nare-red tag kayo ay ina-associate sa mga makakaliwang grupo. Hindi lamang sa makakaliwang grupo, but specifically sa mga grupo na associated with the revolutionary group sa Pilipinas. At sa Pilipinas, kapag sinabi nating revolutionary group, kasi po yung pagiging komunista globally, wala namang masama doon. Dahil ang komunismo ay isang political paradigm. Isa po siyang lehitimong partido sa iba't ibang bansa. Pero dito sa Pilipinas, tinag ang pagiging komunista at ang pagiging bahagi ng revolutionary group ng komunista na terrorist group at some point. Right?
Yeah. Tsaka yung goal daw is to overthrow government.
Oo. Palitan yung gobyerno, magtatag ng bagong sistema, no? So, natag sila terrorist group ngayon, masama po yun kapag nare-red tag kayo kasi hindi lamang dahil nag-express kayo na oposisyon sa gobyerno, kung hindi pinapahayag nito na hindi lang simpleng anti-government, gusto nyong i-overthrow ang government. Kaya very dangerous po ang pagre-red tag sa mga tao at ito ay nagiging mekanismo sa pag-suppress ng karapatan ng pamamahayag. At yung issue po ng red tagging ay hindi lamang sa Pilipinas, minomonitor po tayo sa buong mundo kung paano tayo nagpo-progress sa issue ng usapin sa pagkapatigil ng red tagging. So
Yung
ngayon,
lang sinabi ni Prof. Shelo kanina na hindi problema sa ibang parts ng mundo, no? Kasi they run for seats sa parliament at nahalal sila. So along with all the other political parties, they are part ng engaged.
formally engaged sa political system. Ang mga tao na may paradigm o pananaw nung principles or prinsipyo ng komunismo.
Yeah.
Yan. Pero alam niyo po, yung sa atin sa Pilipinas, yung red tagging ay isang forma, pero wala pong red tagging sa ibang bansa. Pero meron din silang iba't iba pang forma ng political suppression. So, meron nga po ako isang discussion na ito ay actually global trend. Kaya maraming iba't ibang grupo ang nagbabantay kung paano papapalawakin ang forma ng demokrasya sa iba't ibang bansa. Hindi lang po sa Pilipinas yon. But dito po pasok yung mahalagang function ni Jenny at ng Facebook.
Diyan, ano ba yung technical description ng binasa ko kanina? Ano ka sa
Laymanized.
Meta? Paki-explain nga.
Yes, so yeah, gusto ko nga pong linawin yun, no? So, first of all, hindi po ako Facebook employee. So, yung Meta is the company na nagmamay-ari ng Facebook and Instagram and actually Threads, yung may Threads na platform. And then, separately, meron pong tinayo yung Facebook, yung Meta, na entity, yung tinatawag nila Oversight Board. Yun yung parang self-regulatory body to hold itself accountable sa mga decisions concerning social media posts. Kasi nung tinayo nila to, naisip nila na hindi dapat yung company mag-isa ang nagde-decide kung aling posts ang dapat i-take down or ang dapat i-keep up. Especially kung ang mga nagpo-post, mga government actors or mga influential, kunyari, protesters or mga activists. So, inisip ng Facebook, ng Meta na hindi sila dapat mag-isa nagde-desisyon ng mga ganito. So, tinayo nila tong oversight board to help them decide. So, ako po, nagtatrabaho po ako dun sa oversight board and ako po yung nag-lead nung work namin on elections and civic space. So, napaka-importante po dun yung civic space component kasi dito po pumapasok yung mga posts concerning red tagging. So, base nga po dun sa Amnesty report na yung mga aktivista, mga human rights defenders na nililabel as red tag, nililabel as komunista, and if I'm not mistaken, minention po dun sa report na, as you said nga po, Prof. Shelo, dog whistle po to, diba? Yung function nito na komunista equals terrorist.
Yeah.
So, yung civic space issue po to. So, I'm really looking forward to our discussion and yes, so feel free to ask away.
Oo. So ikaw pala yung kukulitin ko sa OGP. Dun sa Open Government Partnership. That's yung isa po yung extracurricular activity ko. And isa sa malaking bahagi ng advokasya natin, yung pagpapalawak ng tinatawag na civic space. Malamang yung mga ibang kababayan natin hindi pa na-encounter yung term. Pero ano ba ibig sabihin ng civic space?
Civic space.
Nire-restation. Sige nga.
Ito yung pag-recognize on the part ng gobyerno na may function ang civil society.
Yeah.
So on the part of civil society, na-assert natin na meron tayong lugar, no, na dapat galawan upang mag-influence ang policy making sa government.
Oo. So bahagi po ng isang malusog or matatag na demokrasya ay yung pagkakaroon ng espasyo ng mga mamamayan ng malayang pamamahayag. So ibig sabihin, pwede talaga natin dapat i-criticize ang gobyerno. Pwede natin sabihin kung hindi tayo masaya sa ginagawa nito nang walang political repercussion. So yun po yung tinatawag na civic space. Yung ano ba yung extent ng kakayahan natin na ipahayag, i-criticize, at sabihin yung nararamdaman natin sa gobyerno dahil bahagi po yan ng accountability. Malapit tayo mag-eleksyon. Binoboto natin tong mga taong to. Kaya natin sila binoboto ay kinatawan natin sila sa gobyerno. Ang responsibilidad nila ay gawin yung interest natin. Hindi yung para silang diba? Idol natin. Baligtad po yun, lagi itong sinasabi. Tayo, yung mga mamamayan, dapat accountable sila sa atin. At isang pamamaraan para maging accountable sa atin ay dapat meron tayong malayang espasyo ng pamamahayag. Hindi po kaya po talagang malaking issue itong red tagging, no? So siguro we can have an overview. Ano ba tong, kasi po nagkaroon ng report ng Amnesty International tungkol sa patuloy na red tagging sa Pilipinas. Actually, this is not the first. Alam naman po natin na naging malakas or nagsimula yung issue ng red tagging na yan noong panahon ni Pangulong Duterte. At marami nagsasabi, medyo nabawasan na. Kasi nagpalit na tayo from Duterte to President Bongbong Marcos. But unfortunately, kahit na, kasi si dating Pangulong Duterte mismo ang nagre-red tag, no? That's why it was so dangerous at nag-set siya ng hindi magandang halimbawa. Kasi kung presidente mo mismo yung umaatake sa civic space, kaya po yun yung tinatawag na pag-atake sa civic space. Kasi paano ka na makakapagsalita? Nawawala na yung substance na sasabihin mo. Wala nang makikinig sa'yo. Pag natag ka bilang terorista. No? So, minsan naman, wala yung due process kasi, pag ganito sinabi mo, komunista ka. So, yung intention sa pagre-red tag ng mga tao ay hindi lamang pananakot kung hindi para tanggalin yung atensyon ng mga tao sa sinasabi mo. At yung height po ng red tagging sa Pilipinas. At tumawag yan sa atensyon ng buong mundo, no? Hindi lang natin pinag-uusapan yan sa Pilipinas, talagang malaking kahihiyan yan. na Pilipinas, unang demokrasya sa Asia. Asia. Pero may ganitong behavior na nangyayari sa pangunguna ng Pangulo ng bansa. So medyo nagkaroon ng optimism dahil nagpalit na tayo ng presidente. Pero unfortunately kasi wala pang outright statement na ginagawa si Pangulong Bongbong Marcos para ipatigil ang red tagging. Hindi katulad yan ng baka maybe wala pa tayong enough na pressure na ginagawa kay PBBM. Kasi katulad nung sa Pogo, bigla siya nag-react nagre-react na lahat ng tao. So baka kailangan niya ng naghintay pa siya ng signaling. Hindi pa niya alam kung ano yung tamang gawin.
May learning curve daw. Presidency.
Hindi lang siya learning curve. Baka level of sensitivity.
This is where Jen comes in, no?
Yes.
Kasi yung AI report po, I should say Amnesty International, para di ma-confuse sa artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Tags both the Duterte administration and the present BBM administration as states that use Facebook in particular, to I mean in general may red tagging, but Facebook in particular para mang red tag using binivilify sila, no? So it's red tagging in a digital platform.
Yeah.
And may mga kaso talaga if you read the entire report, may mga actual activists na intimidate.
Especially the
mga babae to.
The youth, yung mga kabataan
very
natin.
Young
women. At saka, I guess, kaya naging tutok ang Facebook because more than 90% ng mga Filipinos are on Facebook. So, napakadami talagang user. So
the first question should be, of course, are you aware of this and what is Meta doing about this?
So, I can only speak po for the Oversight Board because hindi ko po alam anong ginagawa ng Meta about it, but that's actually the important question that we should be looking into. And mamaya po, I will suggest some options for users to find remedy with us. So, mamaya po pwede natin pag-usapan. Pero, we're very aware of this issue, and ako po personally, I'm very aware of it because before I joined the Oversight Board, I also work for a nonprofit po, and I authored a report on the phenomenon of red tagging under the previous administration. So, I agree with you po na this is a really huge issue, and I'm glad na someone is still paying attention. Amnesty International has produced this report. So, I think yung pinaka-issue po dito concerning social media is the law, the Anti-Terrorism Act. Because meron po sa content moderation po yung tinatawag sa the way we review, the way social media companies, not just Meta, but also Twitter, TikTok, the way social media companies assess social media posts, review social media posts, ang tinatawag po dyan sa activity na yan, content moderation. Ngayon, it can be divided into two kinds. Content can be divided into two kinds. Yung isa po, tinatawag natin illegal speech. So, content that violates local law. And dito po papasok yung Anti-Terrorism Act. Any content that a government agency, they can reach out to any of these social media companies, not just Meta, they can say, take down this content kasi terroristic tong content na to. Right? Ang problema dyan, magkakaroon ngayon ng due process issues. Kasi what if hindi yan judicially determined by a court? Kung it's not based on a case, but unilateral decision ng isang government agency. And this can also be happening behind the scenes. So hindi po natin alam paano nila kinikilatis itong content na to. Then they will reach out to the social media company also behind the scenes saying, please take this down. So, and then I can tell you more, ano pong ginagawa ng Meta, at least yung sinasabi nilang proseso nila sa ganitong klaseng content. Yung second kind of content po, yung tinatawag nating, I guess for lack of a better term, I call it lawful but awful speech. So ito yung, si Prof. Dan, I'm sure he knows this, ito yung lawful speech, constitutionally protected speech, speech protected under international human rights law, pero awful. Meaning to say, we don't want to see this kind of content on social media. A good example would be fake news, right? Information. Or, kunyari, misinformation saying na ivermectin cures COVID-19 or horse manure cures COVID-19 or misinformation about elections. Another good example po would be hate speech. Pero kasi 'di ba, maraming bansa hindi po unlawful ang hate speech, including the Philippines. So, hate speech, bullying and harassing content, hindi po yan illegal under Philippine law, under international human rights law, pero tinitake down po yan ng Meta kasi and ng other companies, I should say, other social media platforms, kasi for them, users don't want to see that. They don't want to see harassing content, or posts that harass or bully protesters, activists, gender minorities, etc. So, yan po yung, I should say, two kinds of problematic content. Yung illegal under local law and yung lawful but awful. Pero yung lawful but awful may nuances rin po yan. Kasi for example nga po, hate speech is illegal sa ibang bansa, pero sa ibang bansa, hindi po. So kung illegal po yung isang content, papasok po yan dun sa unang category.
Actually, iniisip ko yung sa awful eh. Awful from whose perspective? No? Kasi actually, actually the reason, like itong kinakwento, yung reason ba't bigla ako napatiktok is, after ng pagiging USEC ko, meron ako dapat isang YouTube discussion with Robbie Alampay. It happened naman. Pero yung discussion namin ay tungkol sa specifics ng budget. I think that was a budget.
Use of data.
Analytics. Oh yeah, use of data. Saan tayo maghahanap ng mga government data para i-analyze. And then, tinanggal siya ng Facebook. Which is kind of weird. Kasi parang, okay, sino bang awful to from whose perspective? Kaya ganun yung question. Kasi it's about transparency. It's about data. Saan ka maghanap ng data para i-validate at i-check ang gobyerno. So maybe sa gobyernong may tinatago tungkol sa corruption, that'll be awful. But may mga ganong surprising posts sa Facebook. Lalo na, siguro especially yung sa fake news na yan, no? Yung process of validation. Yeah. When you say it's fake news or misinformation or even to shut down yung mga accounts naman na intentionally doing disinformation work.
Dagdag ko lang po, Prof. Chelo, naalala ko po dahil dun sa comment nyo, actually you raised an important point kasi interestingly, meron din pong mga government agencies na nagre-report ng content sa social media companies not for violating local law, but for violating the social media company's community standards.
Yes. So, yung ginagamit madalas.
So, magkaiba po yun, di ba? Na kahit na hindi gawing illegal yung isang type of speech or type of post, i-report po yun ng government agency sa Facebook, let's say, saying na, oh, this goes against your violence and incitement policy, or this goes against your misinformation policy. Ang consequence po nun, magkaiba. Kasi kung yung content po, iti-take down kasi it violates local law, i-geoblock po, yung tinatawag na geoblocking. So, i-restrict yung access sa content sa bansa lang na yun or sa region na affected. Usually sa bansa. Pero kapag it violates the community standards, iti-take down po yun sa buong mundo. So, wider po yung geographic scope kapag the content violates community standards.
I assume may review process when you get a complaint?
Yes. So may review process po for both. So for local...
And how long does it take? Kasi na-resolve ba yung issue mo?
Oh, actually, hindi yung post namin ni Robbie Alampay, hindi pa ako nagsulat ako about it Tapos wala pa ako nakuhang feedback kung bakit tinanggal. But may portion sa Facebook, hindi ko masyado in-explore lahat-lahat ng mga tab. Pero may notice ako doon na I violate community standard sa mga post ko. So I was like, alin doon? So, well, up to now,
That's 2 years.
hindi, pero may general assessment pa rin ako dun sa isang portion ng sa Facebook ko, yung mga qualification something nakalagay doon. You are not meeting the community standards on ganyan. So parang alin sa mga post ko yung hindi feeling ko bait-bait ko nga eh. So
So, part po yan nung tinitingnan namin as an oversight board. So, simula po nung, nagsimula kami like a few years ago, 2019, 2020. Ngayon po, kapag nag-appeal kayo sa Facebook, pag na-exhaust nyo po yung appeals process, tapos hindi pa rin kayo masaya dun sa resulta, meron pong option doon na mag-appeal sa oversight board. Yun po yung paraan para makita namin yung apelan from the users themselves.
How many cases do you have?
So, ngayon po, so marami na po kaming cases, siguro 100.
oo. Pero kasi kung globally ang minomonitor nyo,
So, we get a
kung
lot of
global
appeals.
incidents, yeah.
We get a lot of appeals po, thousands of appeals per day.
Yeah.
Ang problema po, so para po kasi kaming Supreme Court in a way, in the sense that we don't take all. So hindi po kami yung parang appeal mechanism within the platform. So kami po yung pinipili lang po namin, nagse-select lang po kami ng types of cases. Meron po kaming criteria. So isa po sa criteria namin, gaano ba kakomplikado yung policy questions na pinapresent ng ng post na to? Or ano ba yung presidential value nito or yung impact niya sa users around the world.
Yeah.
So may mga criteria po kaming tinitingnan bago po namin piliin yung isang case. Pero ang suggestion ko po para dun sa mga users na nabibiktima ng red tagging, please continue filing an appeal within Meta, and kung hindi po kayo masaya dun sa resulta, you can always file an appeal with the Oversight Board. Nandun po yun, lalabas po yun dun sa notification dun sa kung anumang platform yung ginagamit nyo.
I was actually thinking kasi bigla ako napaisip kung if you're receiving thousands of complaint across the world, bigla ako napaisip kasi data yun eh. Yung I'm wondering kung na-explore nyo na nga yung paggamit ng artificial intelligence in terms of profiling. If you can actually do trending sa number of complaints na nangyayari sa isang bansa. And you can see kung ano yung, kasi Facebook should have a profile kung sino tong mga taong to. So you can actually see at political trend, 'di ba? Kung merong may ganong nangyayaring suppression within a country. And therefore, maybe not to deal with individual cases, but to actually look at trends within countries and even globally. Kasi bigla ko napaisip yung... Hindi, pero naisip ko yung trabaho nila. Ang hirap naman na you deal with individual cases. Tapos pwedeng may outlier, or is this a trend? And that becomes a political question, which I think should be answered and reviewed by the oversight. Because yun nga, sa konteksto ng civic space, hindi ka naman nagtatrabaho as another layer of appeal process ng Meta But kung merong pattern of suppression na nangyayari, halimbawa sa issue ng, it's not just, halimbawa, environment. Makikita mo yung trend din, lahat ng post tungkol sa dam na to, binablock dito sa country na to. And therefore, it becomes more interesting.
Yes, tinatrack po namin yung ganong klaseng data dun sa appeals na dumadaan po sa amin. And meron na rin po kaming process ngayon, yung tinatawag naming bonding. Sorry, yung cat ko, tinatry niyang
fine. We want to see the cat.
Kanina pa siya palakad-lakad. Usually, wala siyang pakialam sa akin.
Ang cute!
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Kasi may show.
Gusto yan sumali.
Oo.
So, meron na rin po kaming tinatawag na bundling. So, usually po, sa isang case, meron pong, one case can consist of several posts. posted by different users. So usually po, nangyayari yan kapag kunyari, same content, shinare po ng user, ng maraming users. So we're exploring ways to bundle other types of posts. So definitely po yung suggestion nyo, that's something we've been thinking about and considering how to expand it further.
Alright. I have 2 questions.
Teka lang, baka
sorry.
mag-question. Sasabihin ko sana, if you need help sa data analysis, bigla kasing nag-work yung brain ko. Imagine mo, if they're giving you data and this is a global pattern, you can actually do coding Tapos mas madaling monitoring. Tapos you can even look at sectoral and then may time aspect. Yung mga ganun. Mas madali yung magiging buhay nila. Kasi especially on civic space issue.
Which is related to my first question.
Kasi dapat quick response kapag human rights
related to my
issue.
first
Diba?
question.
So, okay.
So yung question ko, yung disposition rate ninyo ng cases, how quickly do you resolve tong appeal sa inyo? And the second question, before she asks another one, specifically to red tagging, is it only coming from the Philippines or is it a phenomenon that's also present in other countries?
So, yung second question po muna. So I think, I agree with Professor Shello. I think red tagging is a specific Filipino phenomenon, but different manifestations happening in other countries. Yung isa rin pong interesting na nakikita natin in other countries is yung pag-delegitimize ng justice and accountability mechanisms like the ICC or NGOs by questioning their funding sources. So, very familiar, right? So, yun po yung merong mga similarities and overlaps. Although yung red tagging po mismo, I think po it's a distinct Filipino issue. Yung first question po, disposition rate. So, under our governing documents, we have to decide cases within 90 days. In reality po, we go over 90 days. So usually like 100 or 120. And that's usually because of the issues involved and the different, the deliberation that a certain issue requires. And I know that's not a satisfactory answer, right? But it is what it is, and we are very we take the criticism very seriously, and we're doing our best to decide cases within the 90-day period.
Gusto ko lang i-expand yung discussion kasi hindi pa yan nakakaabot sa Pilipinas yung issue ng civic space tungkol sa funds ng mga NGOs, but this is a global phenomenon din, and in fact, I was trying to highlight globally yung mga some of nasa Pilipinas best practice ito. And the reason why I'm saying best practice kasi may actually threat ang government to overtake yung ating independent process ng accreditation ng NGOs. We have the Philippine Council for NGO Accreditation sa Pilipinas po. Ito yung paano natin ma-recognize na okay, legitimate tong NGO na to. Meron po tayo nung ganong council, no? Yung Philippine Council for NGO Accreditation. And they actually help yung pag-regularize ng mga NGOs, yung engagement ng NGO and the government, particularly the Bureau of Internal Revenue. Kasi nagtatax, nagbabayad din tayo ng tax. In other countries kasi, nagkakaroon ng mga legislation para mas maging restrictive in terms of funding ng mga NGOs. Alam naman natin ang history ng NGO, alam niyo ng government organizations, no? Ang history talaga niyan kung bakit nagkaroon ng mga NGOs ay para maging partner ng government sa development work. Kasi mabagal kumilos ang gobyerno and minsan matindi yung corruption. So sometimes yung mga pondo, yung mga assistance, instead na idaan sa gobyerno na may kabagalan, ay dinadaan sa NGO para magkaroon ng mga development assistance sa mga communities, development work, political work, etc. So yun po yung evolution ng NGO. Hindi po yan tinayo talaga para revolutionary reason, but para maging partner ng government sa pagpapalakas. Kaya lang syempre may mga specific na prinsipyo po yan na sinusulong, kasama na yung political rights, economic rights, social rights, all these human rights. And unfortunately, sa ibang bansa, na-attack din po ang mga NGOs. Actually, hindi naman yan sa ibang bansa lang, sa Pilipinas din. And hindi din naman natin mabiblame kasi the Napoles scam,
Yeah.
At the years before, sinira yung pangalan ng mga NGOs dahil marami na nagkikreate ng mga fake NGOs. So, importante po talaga yung mekanismo ng accountability din ng mga NGOs. Kasi tumatanggap tayo ng pera, nagbibigay tayo ng mga serbisyo, assistance, ganyan. So, meron din dapat accountability mechanism ang NGOs. Pero, ang problema ay kapag pumasok na yung gobyerno at ginagamit yung kanilang power para isuppress yung mga NGOs na hindi nag-a-agree sa ginagawa ng gobyerno. Nawawala yung independence. So, kaya ako, on my work sa Open Government Partnership, talagang gusto kong dalhin sa world stage itong work ng Philippine Council natin for Independent Accreditation. Kasi gusto ko pakita sa kanila na, sa Pilipinas, meron kaming ganitong mekanismo at nagfa-function siya. That's one. And second, gusto ko rin silang i-protect dahil dito sa inisyatibo ng gobyerno na kuhanin yung ginagawa nila. So, two things, no?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yung next question ko is, consistent ba yung definition ninyo ng red tagging with, di ba we were talking to Congressman Adyong? And he was saying yung sa Quadcom, wala raw silang mahanap na definition ng red tagging. Yeah. Sabi na, they're the first ones to define it dun sa bill na final nila pursuant to their hearings. Do you have one?
So hindi po defined yung concept na red tagging, yung term na red tagging under under Meta's community standards. Yun po yung parang dictionary na basehan namin sa pag-decide po ng, kunyari, violence and incitement policy. Usually po, pag tinignan niyo yung page na yun, may definition po what constitutes violence and incitement, against whom, anong mga konteksto na magva-violate yung post. Minsan may mga examples silang nilalagay. Pero yung red tagging po kasi it's a very ambiguous term. So,
Yeah.
it could mean anything. And it could, So, to answer your question, Prof. Dan, no. Pero dito po, importante, mahalaga na may case. Kasi only in an actual social media post, you can see paano po delikado itong post na to against a protester or an activist or a student. So, sana po magkaroon ng appeal na pwede po naming ma-review.
Actually, dun ako curious kasi for example, nabanggit mo na sometimes it takes more than 90 days to review. Ang experience ko kasi, for example, nung nasa board ako ng Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative and ngayon nasa global steering committee ng Open Government Partnership. And when we say quick response, we also monitor yung mga ganitong issue ng civic space. So halimbawa, merong isang aktivista na nagkakaroon ng problema sa isang bansa. Meron kaming mga mekanismo ng quick response team na call agad yung attention ng government na this is a violation ng civic space, etc., etc. And to the extent na sometimes you help a person get out of that country kasi that person is being attacked. Pero mabilis yun. Mabilis na proseso. Papaisip na naman ako ng mga ibang project. And then, so iniisip ko, baka dapat we start thinking about the global approach to social media in terms of protecting civic space because you mentioned yung independent board nyo only works for Meta, right? It's established by Meta but independent and then takes a while. And I'm actually wondering, so pagka nagkaroon kayo ng findings sa appeal, ano yung mga response na pwedeng mangyari?
Yeah, so actually, this is a good segue kasi para ma-explain ko po how it works, how our institution works. So, you're right, Prof. Shelo. So, yung recommendations po namin global, even though yung post concerns one specific country, let's say, kunyari po, meron kaming case on red tagging content in the Philippines. We make sure na yung recommendations po that will come from the decision on the post will also affect other countries. Kasi po yung community standards ng Meta, global po yan eh. Wala naman pong para sa Pilipinas lang or para sa Amerika lang. The same community standards for everywhere. And yung isa pong comment nyo na for Meta lang po, yun. So, yun nga, it's a self-regulatory body. Parang wala naman pong appetite, unfortunately, yung other companies to create one. But at least meron pong oversight board. And dun, to be completely candid, dun po ako natutuwa na at least meron tayong ganito,
Yeah.
right? If you have $1 billion company, would you rather not have something like this rather than nothing at all? So, how do cases come to us? So, yung isa ko pong dinescribe, users can directly appeal to us by exhausting yung complaint mechanism sa Meta platform, Facebook, Instagram, Threads. And then, yung isa pong avenue is for Meta to refer cases to us. So, minsan, dahil nagmo-moderate po sila ng content, minsan sila mismo nahihirapan, paano ba nila dapat i-approach itong ganitong klaseng post? So, just to give an example, nag-refer po yung Meta ng case sa amin on UK drill music. So, yung London police nag-request sa Meta, approached Meta, sabi sa kanila, please take down this content because it violates your community standards for it's drill music or parang rap. And then sabi nila it violates your community standards, I believe, for violence and incitement. Kasi 'di ba minsan yung rap music may explicit lyrics.
Yeah,
Yun.
yeah.
So nirefer po nila yun sa amin. And then we decided, Meta removed the content. Then they referred the case to us. And then sabi namin, mali na ni-remove niyo yung content. Kasi artistic expression yan eh. And wala namang imminent harm. Wala namang nangyayaring gulo ngayon dun sa area ng London. At least nung time na pinost yun, wala namang nangyayaring gulo dun sa London that would make the words there contribute to some existing violence or violence situation. Wala pong ganun. So, yun po yung isang magandang example na I think analogous dito sa red tagging, right? Kasi another example po, blasphemous content sa Pakistan. Nirefer ng Meta sa amin na dapat ba i-take down kapag yung content can potentially violate the blasphemy law sa isang bansa. Eh, di ba ang blasphemy po, laws on blasphemy are incompatible with human rights standards.
Yeah.
So medyo tricky din po yung mga ganyang sitwasyon na yung mismong gobyerno, meron silang mga batas na hindi aligned sa human rights standards, pero yan po yung pupunta po sila sa social media company, asking the social media company, either because it violates their local law or it violates the community standards of the company. So yun po yung, that's how complicated the situation can be.
I can imagine kung paano naging very tricky yun, no? Kasi for example, may mga local laws ka nga na nagsusuppress ng freedom of expression. And therefore, gusto mo siyang i-reform. At isa sa mga process or strategy on creating reforms would be creating public pressure eh. But because may existing laws at yung isa sa mga parameters na ginagamit ay kung nag-go against existing laws, na yung existing laws naman nag-go against international human rights standard, how do you process that? And if you're going to use, kasi hindi naman pwedeng absolutist at saka imposible. I mean, if you see social media as a platform, hindi mo siya pwedeng sabing wag gamitin as a political tool because now it's a space for freedom of expression and definitely we have to take advantage of that also. So in fact, it's impossible to insulate social media from political expressions but the dangerous thing is it can be used as a political tool also. So, yun yung, kaya ako napapaisip kanina na maybe parang kasi sa governance side ako how do we expand this na dapat yung pressure is not just coming from Meta, coming from us demanding Meta na magkaroon ng ganitong accountability mechanism but to all social media platform and then make your board more independent in the sense that because currently you're funded by Meta, right? Yes. So dapat may firewall talaga in terms of funding, independent operations. Nag-function ng brain ko.
So, actually,
right?
So meron nga pong separate entity. I'm an employee of that separate entity, separate LLC under Delaware law.
Mm.
Tapos meron po kaming trust. So,
Mm.
yung Meta, nagbigay po sila ng pera dun sa
Yeah.
amin and administered siya by the trust. So, wala pong
Mm.
kinalaman yung Meta kung paano ginagastos yung pera. Pero
Yeah.
tama po kayo, galing po sa kanila.
Oo, but that's actually good kasi yan na yung mga ilan sa mga mekanismo kung paano magkaka-create ng firewall between the organization na kung saan in-exercise mo yung oversight mo at saka yung organization na nag-exercise ng oversight. Pero hindi ko naman sa dinadagdagan yung trabaho niyo. Sana isama na rin.
But you are.
Oo, and then make it broader because this is just Facebook. Ang dami-dami na rin nasa TikTok, meron pang mga iba't ibang platform. So, at saka para mas magkaroon ng ipin Kasi kung halimbawa 90 days and then you just go back to Facebook and say, okay, restore the post. Pero minsan kasi pagka political discussion, political movement, you're pushing for reform, 90 days is too long. Mawawala na yung momentum ng isang kampanya. So they actually need more resources to be able to do this. Plus, ang isa pang nakikita kong challenge is naghihintay kasi kayo na i-elevate ng Facebook yung isang issue para makarating sa inyo. If I am to operate your organization, dapat may automatic access kayo sa information na nasa Facebook and to have an AI mechanism, hindi Amnesty International, but artificial intelligence to go through all these posts and see a pattern.
Malapit na yan, I think.
Pattern na lang. Kaya na yan ngayon. Na pattern ng tinitingnan so that you generate regular
You're alerted,
reports
yeah.
and be alert. And at the same time, kapag na-alert, hindi lang attention ng Facebook kasi dapat ang tinatawagan dyan. You can even have links sa UN because these are political rights So kapag nakakita ka ng suppression ng karapatan ng pamamahayag at pattern nito sa isang bansa, dapat immediate. So imagine kung halimbawa may concerted effort na, babalik na naman ako sa mining, pero sige, wag mining. Suppress yung, halimbawa, kampanya ng mga indigenous people tungkol sa isang proyekto. Ito, global to. Isang proyekto na magbibuild ng isang dam sa area ng indigenous communities. Tapos nag-oppose sila. At ginagamit nila yung Facebook para ipahayag yung opposition nila dito sa pagpasok ng isang dam sa kanilang ancestral domain or sa kanilang lupain, 'di ba? Pwedeng magkaroon kasi ng pattern ng bawa yung the government na nagpo-push ng dam project can complain na i-block natin to. And then it becomes a pattern. So nawala na ng space to express yung kanilang opposition. It becomes a political issue. But kung sa current process natin, ganun nga katagal nawala na yung momentum, pwedeng natuloy na yung project, di ba? But it has huge implication. Kaya inisip ko, we should broaden the function of the board, covers all social media platform. Tapos, nakalink sa government and other international organizations.
Dati po, parang tingin ko po kasi yung landscape, yung field po ngayon ng content moderation, iba na versus 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Mm-mm.
Pero at one point po, there was the hope na this could be a cross-platform. Hindi po yung Meta, but I think some users, some stakeholders thought na dapat nga an industry-wide, hindi lang to isang company. Pero wala pong motivation yung ibang companies to make this industry-wide, unfortunately. So, but yeah, I see your point. And yung sa 90 days naman po, I agree. I think, ang masasabi ko lang po dun is, because we select cases na may long-term policy implications and because global, so the reason, kaya part po nung proseso namin, so meron po kaming public comment period na 2 weeks, and then minsan po hinihintay namin yung lahat ng information na kailangan para ma-review ng maayos ng decision makers yung post. So marami pong proseso na nangyayari na hindi po to, this is not an excuse, but just to lay out some of the processes that we have. Para po talaga siyang case na, may deliberation process, may review process, etc. Pero dahil nga po yung policy implication, global so nangyayari to. So for example, yung example niyo po on the mining, post on the mining, I agree na pwede pong mag-lapse na. at least dun sa specific situation na yun. Pero tingin ko po, yung mga recommendations that may come from the decision on the post may still help other contexts. Because we're trying to improve the policies on a global scale. Um, and mahirap din po siya kasi maraming komplikasyon. So, ang pinakamagandang example that I can think of is yung COVID-19 misinformation. So, nung
Yeah.
2022 or 2021, uh, nag-refer po sa amin yung Meta saying, should we scale back on how we moderate COVID-19 misinformation? Kasi by this time, we already have vaccines. This was 2021. We already have vaccines. We know more about the virus than we did last year. So, hindi na ganun ka delikado sa public health and safety yung COVID-19 misinformation compared nung 2020 na wala pa tayong alam about it. So, yun po, hindi po siya case eh. Meron din kasi kaming tinatawag na advisory opinion. So I guess this is how we're different from a court kasi ang court only justiciable cases but hindi siya case. Parang give us a policy memo on how we should treat COVID-19 misinformation now that may vaccines na. Pero yun po yung time na before nilift ng WHO yung emergency declaration na COVID-19 is a global pandemic. Before po nun. So after the vaccines were rolled out, pero before the lifting of the emergency declaration, mahirap po yun because we had to come up with a global policy. Pero, di ba, alam naman natin, iba-iba yung health systems and inoculation rates around the world. We also know na nung na-roll out nga yung vaccines, certain countries lang yung may ready access to the vaccines kasi hindi nga siya made available right away to countries like the Philippines, and that's why we had to source from other countries. So how do you come up with a policy that you can scale globally given na iba-iba yung sistema, health systems, inoculation rates, and how people's attitude towards the vaccine. Kasi nga sa ibang bansa, dinedebate kung dapat mo magpabakuna. Sa iba naman, give us the vaccines, wala kang kulang.
I have a question about yung, kasi you mentioned recommendations, yung mga 3-4 times na. Ano ba yung form ng decision ng board? Is it like a court that says, appeal granted, appeal denied? Or
Yes.
where the recommendations come in?
Thanks, Prof. Dan, for bringing us back. So it actually reads like a court decision. Hindi po ganon yung, parang sabihin namin, the Oversight Board upholds Meta's decision to remove the post. Or the Oversight Board has decided to, or decides to keep up the post. And then we say, and then may rationale po, may discussion dun sa body ng decision, why we agree with Meta or why we don't agree with Meta. So, and yung discussion po namin, based yun on Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Yun po yung treaty na nag-guarantee ng freedom of expression. So, yung structure po nun, pareho po sa constitutional law natin, as Prof. Dan will know very well. So you can't, freedom of expression is protected except for certain limitations and kailangan for a valid purpose. And then sa Article 19, may mga purpose po dong nakalagay like public health, public order. And then kailangan yung means used to limit the expression is necessary and proportionate. Hindi susobra, hindi kukulang. So yung structure po ng decision namin, may headings po yun, human rights analysis, and then legality, necessity and legitimacy, necessity and proportionality. Very, very law-like yung itsura. And then sa pinaka-last po, may recommendations kami. And I should say here na yung decision po namin, binding yun on Meta. So wala po silang magagawa kung hindi sundin yung decision namin, pero only with respect to the outcome. Yung sinabi ko po kanina, the Oversight Board agrees with Meta, upholds Meta's decision to remove the post. Binding po yun on Meta. Ang hindi binding sa Meta yung recommendation. Pero obligado po sila na sagutin publicly on their website bakit nila i-adopt or hindi i-adopt yung recommendation namin within 60 days. So, all of this is to say na you might think, ano pang use? Right? Ano pang use ng recommendation? Di naman pala binding. It's an additional layer of public accountability. Kasi at the very least, Meta will say, we're not going to comply with this recommendation because X, Y, and Z. And the public can assess for themselves, hold Meta accountable. No, you should do, this is wrong. You should have done this, ganyan, ganyan. And I can give a good example. So we had a case before concerning Cambodia. I think we released this last year, the Cambodia elections. Dun po sa post na yun, it's a video posted by a government page, I think. Government page ng dating Prime Minister ng Cambodia. Now, we know decades of repression and human rights abuses in the country. And nandun po sa video, tinreten niya yung kalaban niya sa election. So, sabi po namin sa Meta, obviously sinabi namin, take down the post. Kasi in a history of violence such as Cambodia, pwedeng totohanin talaga ng leader yung threat niya dun sa kalaban niya.
Yeah.
May recommendation po kami dun. Sabi namin, kailangan i-take down yung account nung Prime Minister or i-assess paano tratuhin ng Meta yung state actor accounts sa mga bansa na may long history of human rights abuses.
Yeah.
And I think yung isa naming recommendation doon on taking down the account, I could be wrong. It's been a while since I read that decision. But meron pong isang consequential decision. I think yung hindi nila tinake down yung account, hindi nila sinuspend yung account permanently. Hindi nila sinunod. So, nung pinublish nila yung response nila, sabi nila, we're not going to implement this. And yung mga NGOs, they released a statement criticizing Meta, saying dapat, so nag-advocate sila na dapat ganito yung ginawa ng Meta sa Cambodia because ganito. So, I guess what I'm saying is, I think our work at least builds on what civil society is trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish. I don't want to say something so broad na we're trying to save everyone from human rights abuses, but at least we're complementing civil society initiatives.
I'm actually wondering, sa mga report nyo, are they publicly available?
That's my next question.
Kasi yung public accountability and transparency nandun.
Yes, yung decisions po namin all publicly available on our website. And of course, yung response po ng Meta also publicly available on their website.
Let's discuss some more on how to make it a global. I'm looking at OGP kasi and the
Iba na yung iniisip.
Parang hindi yata ako yung dapat guest dito. Meta representatives and other social media.
No, just to create that pressure na i-expand that all social media platforms should have that mechanism. Tapos madagdagan pa ng IPEN yung board nyo to cover all social media platforms. Expand your work, then nagdagdagan talaga ng trabaho. And then, make it politically linked para yung quick response talaga is a quick response and then collaboration with, similar to what we do in EITI. Yun kasi yung binivisualize ko, similar to what we do in EITI. Sa EITI kasi doon ang membership ay governments. So yung mga decisions, binding for government, civil society, and companies operating mining, oil, and gas. That's the model ng EITI. So I'm actually wondering yung feasibility of expanding your work to operate similar to parang an EITI structure na may governments, nandun lahat ng companies represented, and then civil society. And then we have a secretariat. And then may mga ganyan nga, yung quick response. Pero yung work niya would be very data-driven.
Yes. So I think this is just my personal thoughts because this is not part of my work. Pero yung naisip ko lang po kasi, may danger din po kasi kapag masyadong entangled yung government and yung oversight body. And I think dito po lalabas yung And actually, this opens a really interesting discussion kasi lalo na po here sa US na very matunog po yung regulation na parang let's just regulate. Well, hindi
Yeah.
na kailangan ng oversight body, i-regulate na lang natin lahat, 'di ba? I-regulate natin tong companies na to. Ah, for me kasi hindi yun hindi yun I always think about prior to my current job, I was in Myanmar. So I always think about a country like Myanmar when
Yeah.
pag nakakarinig ako ng government regulate, yun yung naiisip ko eh. 'Di ba? So parang we always have to be conscious na hindi lahat ng sistema pareho around the world. And I think I would still want we wouldn't want rights violating government to regulate tech companies. Pero in that space, kung walang regulation, kailangan we should still hold companies accountable. So I
Yeah.
see this project as like going over and above regulation, whether it exists or not. So I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
against regulation, and the oversight board has never said na it's meant to replace regulation, but just to complement. Pero tingin ko po, yung iba kasi sinasabi nila na it's a PR, this is just a PR stunt, this oversight board, it's a distraction from regulation, dapat i-regulate na lang. Pero kasi again, how will we think about this in the context of a country like Myanmar
Correct.
or other rights violating countries? Diba? So, I guess yun yung pinanggagalingan ko lagi in this kind of conversation, and I'm a bit skeptical na mas ano yung entanglement. I guess it depends po. I agree, kailangan may cooperation, pero it depends to what extent ng cooperation. Definitely, we believe civil society input. Very important.
Yes. No, I was actually thinking of a global conversation to the extent of what the regulation means in terms of social media. Kasi tama yung sinabi mo very dangerous, especially if you talk about regulation ng isang country na katulad ng Myanmar or Pilipinas deciding to regulate social media strictly. So they can actually have a control dun sa mga content, everything, di ba? But if we set up a global standards in terms of rules of the game, in terms of, because it is becoming an alternative space nga for freedom of expression and political movement. And therefore, parameters have to be very clear on the extent of government regulation sa mga ganitong platforms. So, pag-usapan natin kasi pag discuss natin yan hahapa another episode. But I'm actually surprised na or baka maybe meron nga hindi lang aware, but I was thinking ko paano ko to dadalan sa usapan ng open government. Kasi sa open government, wala yung industry doon We're only talking of governments and civil society. But ganito mga usapin, civic space, corruption, transparency, and And I initially discussed already paano yung freedom of expression, disinformation, social media. But hindi pa na tutulak sa ganung direksyon. But we'll see.
Sa sa EU, meron pong bagong law, yung Digital Services Act, that tries to regulate social media companies. Pero hindi po yun content-based, which is a good thing. So it's more about yung behavior ng companies. And then, this might interest Prof. Dan, pero sa US naman po, may mga Supreme Court cases that just came out in the summer about how should we think about social media companies? Are they publishers? Are they common carriers or public utilities? Kasi iba-iba po yung implications niyan under constitutional law. Kung publisher like a newspaper or common carrier like a telephone or television network.
It's actually very interesting Kasi kung publisher siya, then nagkakaroon siya ng right to edit and control the content.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then kung public utility po, kailangan nila must carry all views.
Yes, but at the same time, kung public siya, it gives government naman a power to regulate and oversight. Kasi kung utility siya, then it has a monopolistic nature 'Di ba? And if
Pero
there's
yun din yung
monopoly,
question
'di ba?
Kasi di ba merong mga natural monopolies na tinatawag like electricity, gas, services. I guess how similar or not, or how similar or dissimilar social media companies are to these natural monopolies.
Oo. And it becomes a very interesting conversation eh. Kasi from my perspective, hindi siya pumapasok sa kahit ano na yon, sa dalawang definition na yon. Hindi siya publisher. Kasi nga space siya for freedom of expression, hindi natural monopoly in the sense na na may control ka dun, if you look at it as a market. But at the same time, it's not just the market. And if you define it under natural monopoly or oligopoly, yun na nga, doon naman papasok yung power of the government for oversight and regulation. So I would reject both ideas na papasok siya doon. I think we have a new entity that requires a different approach in terms of regulation, kasi multidimensional na siya. It's like a virtual community eh. So hindi siya pumapasok sa ganung definition na lang. Regulation in the sense that it is a business model and therefore has to be regulated. But to the extent that it also influences political, human rights, social, all of those dimensions, then all the other rules on standard human rights should also apply. So hindi na siya pwedeng ikahon sa isang simpleng definition ng entity, but I think another definition of a virtual community should apply.
It's a keynote address. Keynote address yan sa conference that will be organized 2 years from now.
Ano ba yung professorial lecture?
Yan, nag-iisip na ako ng paper.
Ang mahirap din po kasi, ang isa ring interesting question dyan, from a constitutional law perspective, yung sinasabi po natin kanina na kapag isang government agency lumapit sa isang social media company saying, take this down, review this content kasi it violates your community standards. At what point do we say na action yun ng social media company or action yun ng government?
Yeah.
Kasi that has constitutional law implications, yung state action doctrine, na if a private entity is acting at the behest of the government, then that can be interpreted as state action. And therefore, that implicates free speech rights under constitutional law. So, interesting din po yun. Kasi hindi nila sinasabi na take this down under local law. They're saying take this down under your community standards.
Oo.
Pero, interesting din eh. Kasi yung pressure, syempre may informal pressure yan. Kasi yung company, it's under the jurisdiction of that state.
Yes.
As a company. So, meron silang review process, pero hindi natin alam yung informal pressure that they have to consider.
Yeah,
Then,
yeah. And I think doon pumapasok yung bias talaga sa multi-stakeholder approach. Pero kasi yung conversation na yan, if it's a private conversation between the government and like for example Meta, mas mahirap tanggihan yung informal pressure. Pero kung yung conversation na yan ay nasa mas bukas na avenue, na kung saan may representation ng civil society, then that informal pressure, it doesn't disappear, but it becomes less. Kasi ngayon parang bukas na may mga ibang observers na or bahagi ng conversation na to. And decisions, mas mga nagiging objective, less bias. At nawawala din yung pressure for a company to just favor kung ano yung sinasabi ng government.
Yung iba pong mga commentators, ang isa rin nilang sinasuggest is to advocate the government for more transparency sa mga requests na sinesend nila sa mga companies.
Oo. Kaso hindi yan gagawin ng repressive government. Diba? So, anyway. So, ang daming conversation na na-unbundle kasi I think this is a global issue, hindi lang yan issue sa Pilipinas. It's a global issue at napakalaki na implikasyon yan, lalo na ngayon na si Trump ang presidente ng United States.
Congratulations, wala ba?
Sobrang daming, we're just barely scratching the surface kasi hindi pa nga tayo nag-focus sa isang like misinformation at the whole area. For hate speech, speech against immigrants, anti-immigrant speech.
Misogyny, I wanted to ask.
Misogyny, yes.
We can have episodes 2, 3, and 4. Actually, example nga sana tatanong ko kasi for example, si Tasha impersonates Sara Duterte. So she used to have a page na tinake down ng Facebook dahil ano daw.
Impersonation.
Or impersonation, which I think should be covered by political freedom of expression, the political diba? Yes, it's political. Yes, she's
She's not
impersonating.
pretending to be Sarah. She's criticizing.
Yeah, it's a form of expression, diba? But it was her page was taken down.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, actually interesting din yan. Pero unfortunately, wala kaming jurisdiction over pages or groups. So, content pa lang for now. Posts, individual posts.
Oo.
So,
Ito
hopefully,
kasi account, tinanggal yung account niya na wala.
pwede lang kami mag-decide on an account kapag ni-refer ng Meta. Pero kapag sa user galing, posts lang yung pwede so far.
Yeah. Anyway, so maraming salamat, Jenny, for this conversation. No? Biglang naka 1 hour na pala tayo nun. But ang dami pa kasing dimension, and I think we should continue this conversation. Kasi hindi lang siya simpleng yung Facebook post ko, bakit nyo tinanggal. But it has a lot of social and political implication. And I think we should continue this conversation, even the two of us outside this chikahan sa global governance conversation.
Although I like seeing Prof. Dan na tinatanong niyo siya, so parang siya yung nagre-recite.
Ganti to para sa mga dating estudyante. Siya naman yung nire-recitation ko dito, so wala siyang choice, kailangan yung sumagot.
Pumapas na naman ako eh.
Yes,
ayan. So, I don't know. But I don't know if he told you, kasi alam ko siya nag-invite sa'yo, but the last part of our program, but the last part of our program is actually chikantahan. So,
pwede naman daw poems,
singing,
diba?
but
may president na eh.
So dahil abogado siya, tapos inabogado ka niya. Sabi niya, then nag-set na tayo ng president. When yung guest natin ay si Jim Libiran, pinayagan natin siya mag-poetry reading. So, pwede na tayong...
And other guests sing like they're reciting poetry.
Ikaw yung papakantahin ko eh. Yan. So, we have a...
we will transition. I almost said no nung sinabi ni bigla ni Prof. Anna. Papakantahin ko, oh my gosh.
Ayan. Sige, so para hindi tayo tanggihan ng ating mga guests, yan yung alternative, no? Poetry. Pwede ring rap. But let's transition and then we do the poetry. I should make a different one kasi dito chikantahan pa. So, kailangan ko mag-isip ng bagong blurb for poetry.
Yeah.
So, Prof. Chelo, will you also play music for now?
I'm recovering from COVID. So,
oh, no.
So, maybe music on Wednesday. Alright, so sige, let's listen to poetry.
Okay, sige. So, yung babasahin kong poetry is a poem by Mary Oliver. I don't know kung kilala niyo po siya, pero mahilig po siya sa nature. So, short poem lang po. Yung title po niya, Messenger. Okay. My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the quickening yeast, there the blue plums, here the clam deep in the speckled sand. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still not half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. The phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture, and the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing since all the ingredients are here, which is gratitude to be given a mind and a heart and these body clothes, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy, to the moth and the wren, to the sleepy, dug-up clam, telling them all, over and over, how it is that we live forever. Yun. So, medyo joyful naman po yung then.
Sa dami ng problema sa Pilipinas. At sa buong mundo, no? We need those things. So we resort to art para...
To feel better.
Feel better. And have that energy to continuously advocate for what is right. No? So, maraming salamat, Jenny, sa pag-join mo sa amin ngayong gabi. And hopefully, we can invite you again para mapagpatuloy natin yung conversation na to kasi napaka halaga niya. Right? O,
Yeah.
sige. So,
Salamat din po. Thank you so much. Bye.
thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye-bye. Siguro po as an alternative, instead na mag-perform ako kasi parang nabinat ako, babalik yung ubo ko at saka yung malat ko. I can share some of the videos na na-capture nung concert natin, yung pa-concert po ng Angat Pampanga last Friday, na kung saan nag-perform ako ng ilang number playing the sax. So let me share some videos with you para sa chikantahan portion natin ngayong gabi. So naging very exciting po yung event natin na yan last Friday bilang support sa Pili Nation at sa Angat Pampanga sa ating campaign against the disinformation. So susubukan po nating ulitin yung event na yan siguro next time dito naman sa Metro Manila. So maraming salamat po sa nag-organize ng event, Angat Pampanga, sa Miki Lazada, Doc Joy, na nanguna sa pag-organize ng event. So, maraming salamat po at yun nga po, subukan nating ulitin ang event na yan. So, maraming salamat po sa pag-join nyo sa atin ngayong gabi dito sa Chikahan with Prof. Shelo Magno. Katulad nga po ng sinabi ko, napakahalaga nung usapin na to, no, ng freedom of expression, lalo na sa Facebook. At hindi lang actually sa Facebook, but sa buong social media kasi nag-i-evolve na siya eh. In fact, maybe hindi lang siya nag-i-evolve. It has evolved. Ito na po yung ating virtual community. Kaya yung akin, ang take ko dun sa usapin natin ay hindi lang to simpleng regulasyon ng isang business. Kung hindi, may mga implikasyon siya, hindi lang sa operation ng Facebook bilang isang entity or firm, but tayong mga virtual citizens, digital citizens ng social media spaces na to. But at the same time, may malaking dynamic, no? Kasi it's operated by a business, private entity, na may relasyon sa government.
Yeah.
But at the same time, tayo yung digital citizen niya. So dapat para na rin siyang pag-operate ng isang komunidad at dapat lahat ng karapatan na nag-i-exist sa real life ay nag-i-exist din sa social media. But how do we enforce that? How do we assert that? Doon yung walang mekanismo. So kaya ako biglang napaisip na dapat may ganitong global movement na ang oversight ay hindi lamang sa Facebook, kung hindi sa lahat ng social media platform. At dahil ito ay ino-operate ng isang business entity, dapat may malinaw na mekanismo ng transparency and accountability sa pagitan ng pag-regulate at nagkaroon po tayo ng internet interruption there. So nawalan tayo ng internet. nung sinasabi kong kailangan ng mas matinding oversight sa collusion ng government at saka collusion sa relationship
Sorry.
ng gobyerno at ng social media, no? So, dito na po nagtatapos ang ating chikahan ngayong gabi. This is a pre-recorded video kasi po the time difference.
States.
Oo, yung ating guest ay based sa United States. So, maraming salamat po sa pag-join nyo dito sa chikahan with Prof. Shelo Magno. As you can see, hindi pa po kayo fully recovered. So, kita-kita po tayo sa Wednesday uli para sa isang chikahan. Maraming salamat po sa pag-join sa atin ngayong gabi.
Thank you.